Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to House of Footy. It's your boy Ray, and with me, I've got Mac.
What's good?
Unfortunately, Gio won't be able to join us today. He is out of commission, but don't worry, we are covering the action from this weekend's Premier League. We'll also be previewing upcoming Champions League for this week as well. Before we get into it, don't forget to follow us on our social medias, both on X and Instagram. Our handle is at @house_of_footy. Also, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to us. We are on both Spotify and YouTube. And lastly, feel free to get in touch with us via email. We love hearing from you guys, and we want you guys getting involved. Our email is houseoffooty@hotmail.com. Mac is already putting his hands together because this one's going to be a good one. And of course, we have to jump into the, biggest headline from the weekend. Spurs 2, Liverpool 1. Mac, Spurs doing to Liverpool what Liverpool did to them last year in their game at Anfield, I believe. Winning it late and grabbing all 3 points away from the opposing team. But I think this one was a little bit different. But let's hear from you, Mac. What were your takes from this game?
It's very interesting. And going into this game, this was a doozy of a matchup. I feel like we could spend the entire podcast talking about every aspect of this game, and it's enthralling, it's fun, it's exciting. It has the best and worst in football all wrapped into a beautiful little package. But my favorite part, and I think your favorite part, is the controversies. I'm very curious. I think it's difficult playing football sometimes when you're playing 11-on-11. That can be challenging. You know, football's a difficult sport. It's very simple in concept. All you want to do is put the ball into the back of the net. But it's the players that make it difficult. But sometimes when you're facing 11 on, let's say, 13, because the referees are against you, and then you get a couple of red cards, and then it's like 13 on 9, it becomes very, very much more difficult, incomprehensibly more difficult. And that's what it felt like, where it seemed like, do you know the meme of, I think it's the guy from where's the girl, Tangled, the guy from Tangled, and all the swords are pointing against them, and be like, what,
Yes.
what is this? What take do you have that's this like against you type of thing? Where I felt like everybody in the world was against Liverpool in that moment. The referees, in terms of what's going on, in terms of VAR not working, every situation felt like everything that could go wrong went wrong. Even though I would argue they played a phenomenal game in terms of what the game plan was, in terms of cards that were dealt with them, managed it very well. But overall, again, like I said, it was a fascinating game, a thrilling game. Love to see that type of Premier League action, especially when a team I like is not involved, because then I could just enjoy the chaos. But as someone that has, say, a wee bit of emotional attachment to one of these teams, what were your thoughts, Ray? Let's get to the real juicy stuff. What do you think?
Yeah, for sure. Of course, when I was watching it back, first time watching the red card, first talking point of the game, I thought it was harsh. But then, of course, you get the other controversies throughout the game that just keep piling. Crescendos when, of course, the second red card comes, and then Spurs dramatically win it late on. You think the entire league is against us. Everyone is against us. Conspiracy this, conspiracy that. We got to cancel the season. And then it comes out a couple hours after the game, the PGMOL admitting that, it was a human error why the Diaz goal was not given in the first half. And you just, at that point, as a Liverpool fan, you're fuming. And so I guess it's a good thing for the podcast that we're recording on Sunday, the day after the game took place, because I've had a chance to look back. And of course, I do agree with a lot of points that are being brought up. There are very, very difficult decisions to be made, and a lot of them went against Liverpool, which in the heat of the moment makes you feel not great as a Liverpool fan. But looking back at it, I am not as outraged as some of the other online Twitter fans are, but definitely feel some of these are a little bit questionable. And I guess, Mac, if we can go straight into it, Curtis Jones red card, I think personally, I can see it being given, and it's happened multiple times in the Premier League where it's given as a yellow card by the referee. They are asked to go to the monitor to look at it again, and the image is slowed down, repeated at the point of contact, sort of without taking into account the context around it and what sort of led up to that challenge. So for me, it's a 50-50, but I still think it is kind of, it's up in the air, whereas a lot of people are saying it's a red card all day long, which I'm not 100% convinced on. What were your thoughts on that, or any other talking point from this game?
Just separated. What I don't like about the process, and I see where you're coming from, where the referee comes up and the first image that he actually sees, you can see over the back of what he sees, is a still image of Jones's foot high and going into the shin of the Tottenham player. So if you see that as a first image, 10 out of 10 times that's a red card. That's just what it is, right? So the problem with that is that once you have that still image and that's baked in his mind already, to which then you're going back and seeing the entire play, that's where the gray area comes, where he does skin the top of the ball. The foot is high. It is unfortunate. I do think, though, that was a red card. What makes it worse is the compounding of everything else around it, where you have the VAR decision that happens literally a minute later that goes against Liverpool. Then you also have what happened with Diego Jota towards the end of the game, where, again, I think this first yellow card probably a little bit unnecessary, but then you can just see like the disappointment in the referee's face, where he's like, I have no choice but to give this, right? Where it was the compounding of that makes that red card, in my opinion, in the first half for Jones a little bit more controversial, versus for me it is a little bit more clear cut, because even though he does kind of get the ball, how football trend has been going, where if you're making a tackle where the foot is that high on somebody else's leg, you're definitely in a dirty spot. You're definitely in a tough pickle there, where you're looking to be able to get a red card. So I think it's unfortunate. And it was more of the collective, where you're looking at it. That's why it can be perceived as it's a little bit harsh. If that was the only negative decision of the entire game that went against Liverpool, I don't think there would be as much kind of rip-roar. There wouldn't be as much reaction to this type of challenge. Mm-hmm. My favorite part, though, is, again, in this commentary, when we're watching these games, any of the commentary coming around from kind of the older players, like, oh, that was a regular Tuesday night back in the 90s, and this is like, yeah, it's fine. That's a regular tackle. That's a play on, different game now. So I understand a lot of the older people that kind of used to play this game, especially the professionals, they like to be, just as I generally am, is old man shouting out lawn, but it's just not where it is right now. So for me, if for example, in any situation that for me right now, where how the rules are taken in, that has to be red, have more questions about everything else.
That's fair. That's completely fair. And I do agree as well. I can see it being given. My only sort of issue with that, I guess, and it goes well, I guess, with a lot of other similar situations where, again, it's a yellow card given and then the referee is asked to look at the monitor, and then in a still image is given. Referees oftentimes have to use their discretion when they make a call about a penalty judgment. If it's a handball, was there any intent? Was there enough time for the player to sort of react to that? They're using their judgment, whereas for that red card itself, and it's actually been pretty consistent throughout, they look at only what happened and the sort of challenge and where it's happening. And you know what? Looking back at it, I can see why it's given, and I'm not upset about that. And I think on the second red card, the Diogo Jota one, first booking, I don't see it happening, but if you're already on booking, you can't be lunging at that. It's a lost cause. You just have to keep it safe and stick with at least 10 players on the pitch. But yeah, those instances altogether didn't look great. And then of course we have the statement from the PGMOL after the game, which I personally think kind of wish they didn't come out to say this and make this statement personally now, because now a lot of people are going to be questioning and just questioning previous calls and moving forward, questioning, hey, yeah, they gave this call during the game, but are they going to apologize for it afterwards? What sort of accountability do they have other than just issuing an apology? And other fans, I feel like, are going to be even more enraged by this. So I'm not sure. I feel like as a Liverpool fan, it's I guess great that they acknowledge their errors, but I don't know. I think it made the error even worse the following day. So I'm not sure how that's going to go down personally on that. But I guess let's go back to the game, Matt.
We do want to talk about the game, but I do want to talk about this as well, because this is a theme where they have no choice but to apologize, right? If they say nothing, it's going to, the assumption be like, oh, everything was correct. Then there's going to be the controversy about that. the whole kind of momentum of how it looked like in the game. I saw that live. I'm like, that looked onside, but there was no lines drawn. There's nothing there. And this happened last year quite a few times for different games, where the big one that comes to mind again as a Arsenal fan is a game last year where the lines were incorrectly drawn, which resulted in Arsenal ended up tying a game. And then, of course, PGMOL came out afterwards and apologized. They have no choice but to do that. But the top part is that for me, it's an individual error. It does take, which is I really love a lot of the people that will come in and complain about VAR as an idea. It's like, oh, it's taking out the human element, the human error that's part of the game as referees. It's still there. There's still humans operating this machinery. There's always going to be those errors. It's just how it happens. Now it's clear and cut, and you can individually blame this is what happened and why it happened. So I like that there is an accountability, and that referee is supposedly now going to be taking it off of circulation, where it's not just one person supposed to be looking at VAR offside decisions. It's actually two people, where it's the initial referee, kind of VAR referee that sees it, kind of panic there in that moment. The assistant VAR referee, they have that, which is crazy, and still it was missed. It's supposed to call them out, didn't do it. So overall, I like that they're able to make this accountability. I like that it's clear. It just, you feel even worse though if you are a Liverpool fan, because be like, yeah, everyone knew it was wrong. Look, there is no gray area anymore. Everyone who was wrong and allowed it to happen, you know? Very much it's like the spotlight quote from Mark Ruffalo's character. Yeah, it can happen. It's just how it is. But I do want to touch on the game. I think, though, as a game itself, you want to be able to give this coming out of this game and going into this game we talked about, if either of these teams win, does this push them into title contention one way or the other? And I thought it very much could. I've actually, have to backtrack that statement, because Tottenham, 2 men up for a large section of this game, kind of how to get through on a mistake. Great for them. This is a fixture that they never win, even at home. They've never historically done well. I think going into last time, one of the last 24 matches against Liverpool in the Premier League. For that to happen, it was such a slice of fortune, which you could be looking at maybe this is this year. Maybe this is their chance. But I felt like they weren't able to get in behind the Liverpool 8 players out on the pitch aside from a goalkeeper, weren't able to put crosses to the box, didn't really pose much as a threat, kind of were just cycling the ball around just side to side without any of incisive passing, without any creativity. You would have, maybe it was earlier in the game, which I know it's tough to say, hey, they should hope to get 2 red cards for the other team early in the game, but maybe Addison would have had more legs, or maybe they have a different bench piece that they could have gone to inject a little bit more life. But especially with, at that point, Son coming off, who was, in my opinion, one of their best players on that day. I think that they come out of this game, it's great that they got the 3 points, but it leaves me asking questions where, okay, are they going to rely on slices of fortune like this? And how are they going to consistently break down teams instead of just hitting them on the counter? Are they going to be able to do that against the bigger teams? And it'll be interesting to see. So what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, no, So I wouldn't have gone as far to say that they're actually title contenders. We have to mention them because, of course, they're just a point behind Man City now, and they're second in the table. But I wouldn't have gone so far as to say they're title contenders, though I am a little bit more on the other side of that, Mac. I feel like they didn't, of course, with a man advantage, it would have been a lot easier, and it was going to be a big test for them, of course, trying to now break through a team with a low block. And I think they did fairly well. For the most part, I do like, and I mentioned this already, their double pivot with Sarr and Bissouma. They look quite athletic and are able to cover a lot of ground. Whereas as well, Bissouma, coming from Brighton from a few years ago, will be good enough to sort of be press resistant enough to sort of set them account and going the other way. I think my guess is just for Maddison. I know he's been impressing since the start of the season, but I just want to see how he evolves in this team. Is he going to be taking the sort of stepping up and taking the role of, okay, now I'm going to be sort of like a metronome in that midfield where, yes, Sarr and Bissouma can do all of your quote-unquote dirty work, but Maddison, will he be able to control games and speed up games when needed, or slow down things when they're needed as well? But huge shout out to Richarlison and Son for their combination in the first goal, and of course Pedro Porro, even though it was an own goal, he had to that was a great delivery into a dangerous area, which caused a mistake. So I actually do have to give Spurs their credit, even though they did play against at 20 minutes left in the game, only 9 men. I think Spurs should feel good about themselves getting this win, and of course see how things keep going for them. But I guess for Liverpool, just quickly, Mac, conceding again, even though it was under different circumstances, and now getting the loss. Is this a reality check for them based on how well they started their season? What do you think?
I personally don't think so. I think in this game, Liverpool had their chances. If we break it down in terms of key opportunities, be able to create, even with 10 men down, even with 9 men down in some situations, I felt like they actually posed a decent threat. It would just be very interesting to see. I'd be curious to see if Liverpool play a full game with 11 players, how good of a team they are. That's what I'm more interested in. I think this is a reality check where, hey, we've seen a trend here. We're making stupid challenges. We're definitely playing up the referee, and they're one of them. I don't want to say is one team whines more than the others necessarily, but whenever a mistake does go wrong, I think that they're put in the spotlight a little bit more, where Klopp's complaining. There's already talk about getting a fine after this game, which if barely, this is something that you definitely want to complain about. I understand that, but they're a team where they need to try to have an understanding of things are going to be called differently now. They have to react differently now. You can't crowd the referee. Those things are no longer be a position. So you're not giving away the stupid yellow, where you can still accept and take kind of the needed yellow if needed. Where not put yourself in a position like this, where if they just keep the fundamentals of kind of following the rules in place, they can definitely still be a threat. Because in this game, with 10 men, they should have taken the lead to be able to start off, right? So I feel like I personally, after this game, feel more confident coming out to Liverpool if they can sort out probably that disciplinary issue, where if you're able to kind of move past that, if you're able to be able to play with the full 11, you have a manager. It seems like you have a decent amount a team. And even though, again, I personally feel like it's a little shaky, the more and more I see McAllister playing as kind of the defensive midfielder, the more and more he's doing well. He's able to kind of break lines of play. Defensively, I wonder to see against a bigger striker per se, if he's able to drop back and help kind of close off gaps and kind of deal with that and manage that. That's, I think, the next step to see if it's the long-term. It's probably not going to be the long-term plan, but to see how successful they are going to be this year. But I do feel more confident coming out of this game about Liverpool potentially being a title challenger, chasing down a Champions League spot. So they just, again, play with 11 men and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, the chaotic system that Klopp has Liverpool playing will definitely give us that excitement with those rash challenges and high pressing. So we'll just see how that goes. But of course, we got to cover another big game and big result from this weekend, Mac. Aston Villa 6, Brighton 1. It was the Ollie Watkins show. He, of course, got the hat trick. And, Aston Villa, I personally was a little bit skeptical on how they would kick on, sort of the way they started the season. Hot and cold. I guess this result here, question to you, Mac, does this result here put them in a conversation where, they should kick on and find that form that Emery so craves them to have, to be consistently, challenging for those European spots? What do you think?
I think that that might be a little bit too much of a stretch, because personally, this matchup, historically, again, going into the preview, I talked about how well Aston Villa have done against Brighton. But I think specifically with Unai Emery, of what he did in terms of tactically matching man for man against this Brighton midfield, and across the entire pitch, both teams are playing a 4-4-2. It felt like we're back in the 90s again, where football was like that. And what they were accepted the idea, we're not going to have a whole lot of possession in this game. We're comfortable without that, and it'll be in our key moments on the break in transition is where we can excel. And that's where they did. I think the difference of why it was such a drastic win in comparison to, I thought maybe it could have been a 2-0 win, 2-1 win for Aston Villa. The difference being is where we saw everything from Ollie Watkins, who we talked about, where we see a goal where he's able to be able to crash in the box, be able to create a tap in. We saw a goal in transition with his right foot being able to cut across the goalie. And then again, with a slice of fortune with the left-footed finish for his third to be able to complete the hat trick. But again, he's in every area of the pitch doing what he's needed to do. And even in the final minute of the game, missing a chance there, but he was still on. Instead of going to be able to celebrate with Douglas Luiz, he's punching the ground. He wants to be able to make sure that he's kind of in that threat. He's in that conversation. And for me, I think that if he's able to take it to another level, which he hasn't added the goal tally thus far this year, but I think we can all agree he's a player with very strong qualities. If he's able to take that next step, then I feel like that pushes Aston Villa up. This game, though, individually, because of how they are able to tactically match up with Brighton, I think it plays in, like I said, played into their advantage. It played into a system they worked well in, and unfortunately exposed some Brighton's weaknesses at the back. Where again, if they're playing kind of an all-attacking kind of even with both fullbacks going up in all situations, they're going to be caught up on the break because the defensive midfield part, they're not necessarily the strongest defensively, in my opinion. And even though Estepinian is a great left back going forward, a lot of questions defensively. So I think overall, this match sets a tempo for what this Aston Villa could be, and where Brighton still are missing. At least that's my general thoughts.
Yeah, and Brighton actually, on that note, lost 3 of the last 4 games now. Of course, in the Europa League and then in the EFL Cup third round just passed. They have Marseille next in the Europa League, then Liverpool and Man City in the Premier League before they face Ajax in the Europa League again. So another tough 4 matches coming up for them. They've had a great start to the Premier League season, and they've been scoring quite regularly. Is this though a point where, Brighton are now sort of in a spot where, yes, they are still a relatively new team with a lot of players coming in and a lot of players famously leaving the club for huge amounts of fee. Do you expect sort of just a now more, how do you say this, normalizing the trajectory of their season, whereas they started really, really hot and people were really, really high on them, myself included. Of course, they were my dark horse team. But sort of now it's kind of, the games are piling up, very much like Newcastle. We can expect them to lose the games that they're supposed to lose and then win the games that they're supposed to win. So being a little more consistent. I guess, what are your thoughts on Brighton at this point, Mac?
I think that there's still a step they need to be able to take in a couple of areas across the pitch, a little bit more enforcements. They really, if we look at just kind of the numbers, they haven't reinvested a lot of the money they were able to sell off players, specifically to Chelsea, right? They haven't been able to bring in key players across the pitch where, again, I would probably want to be able to bring another center half, maybe bring in a non-Veltman James Milner right back. I want to be able to bring in another defensive midfielder. I want to make additions to this team, but their club structure of how they want to progress, you have to be able to give them the faith. You have to be able to give them the trust. I think, though, these next 2 games that they do have coming up in the Premier League is they're playing at home to Liverpool and then away at City. So these next 2 fixtures, I think, are going to be even more of a barometer where, again, both of those teams, in my opinion, would want to get on the ball more than Aston Villa, which then allows more space potentially for Brighton to be able to get into behind, versus Villa in this game, because they went man-to-man, because they were able to be comfortable in defensively and be comfortable in transition. I feel like that is a little bit more difficult of a tactical matchup, whereas now they're going to be facing kind of the better teams, the bigger teams, that want to play a different style where, especially in the Man City game, they're the ones that are going to want to dominate the ball. They're the ones, which may then, again, of course, create opportunities for players like Matoma or Evan Ferguson to be able to get in behind. So I think that we're going to know a lot more about the trajectory of this team after these 2 games. This one, for me, as of now, it's not a complete write-off where, just throw in the kind of the closet, like, completely ignore it. It's more of, it's a wait and see. This just leave me kind of raise an eyebrow, but I think we'll know more after these next 2 fixtures for them.
For sure. So we're going to take a quick break here, guys, and then we'll be back covering some more Premier League action and also previewing some Champions League matches. So stay with us, guys. Welcome back to House of Footy, guys. We are going to continue today's podcast now, discussing some of the other Premier League results from this weekend. We're going to go straight into the Wolves 2, Man City 1 game. And of course, Man City, league leaders and champions from last year, finally get their first defeat after Pep's comments about how potent Wolves' attack was. And of course, he was referring to Hwang Hee-chan, the Korean striker who scored for Wolves, scored the winner actually, and was of course Pep the butt of the joke for that result from him not remembering his name. But the bigger sort of headline here, Mac, is Man City drop points in the Premier League, and honestly, in a game where they had over 25 shots or at least 25 attempts, didn't look that convincing. What were your takes on this game?
So first of all, I want to be able to jump in and say I'm going to leave my bias here at the door because I generally don't like Roger after the comments he made about Scottish people last year. Not okay with him. They're not a huge fan. But I think he was the biggest miss, at least in some aspects. I know we're talking about offensively in terms in the final third, the creativity, but I feel like what he's able to do to transition the ball, to be able to get into those attacking players, to have them that extra time, that split second, to be able to make that extra touch in the final third so that you can kind of create those opportunities was sorely missed. Kovacic played kind of in the Roger spot in this fixture, and I felt like he lost the ball way too many times, was not great in possession, made too many mistakes on the ball, where there was, even though there was an abundance of opportunities for Man City, 23 shots, that's a very, very difficult day at the office for any defense to be able to come at that. But generally speaking, it's more, or it's higher quality, because the work on the ball that Man City do is so fantastic, and that starts really with Rodri and Ederson, of course, behind him. But in the final third, in transitional moments, Rodri's kind of the kind of the straw that stirs the drink. So him not being there is not great. And since Rodri actually made his Premier League debut back in August of 2019, Man City have lost 5 of the 15 matches that he did not compete in, which for Man City is a drastic number, because normally they would only lose 1 in 15, if at all, right? So I think that his miss was vital. I do want to, though, give credit to Wolves in that way, where, again, in those moments, kind of be able to dig deep, kind of put the extra body on the line, to be able to make that extra block, I think was key. Of those 23 shots, only 8 were on target. And I personally didn't feel like Jose Sa had to make a phenomenal save out of anything. It wasn't like he stood on his head and stole the game. It was more, in my opinion, how defensively they were able to manage players across the attacking Man City attacking line, where I know this might be a little bit unusual. So a player that we probably will never talk about again, Craig Dawson, of what he did on Erling Haaland, just to be able to match up to him one-on-one, following him around, where, hey, no matter what, that's my guy. I'm following him where he goes. It wasn't where a lot of center halves nowadays, they would mostly play in zonal marking. And if player shifts in between, you kind of leave them off. He's like, no, that's my guy. If there's going to be a goal coming, it's going to be coming from somewhere else, and that's somebody else's job to deal with. They did, of course, play with 3 at the back, and Dawson was in the middle, so it allowed the other 2 center halves to be able to step in if needed. So I think that overall, poor for Man City, missing Rodri doesn't help. Could have done a lot better. Feel bad for Calvin Phillips, didn't start again. Again, Kovacic was bad. Hopefully Phillips starts in this next game, in my opinion. But overall, not a great look for City, but credit Wolves.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it was the goals game plan, of course. Anytime they face City in this day and age, will be concede possession and stay sound defensively, put your chances away. Perfect game for them. Another, and of course, I love that you brought up Craig Dawson, because he's going to be telling his kids, his grandkids, of the day that he shut down Erling Haaland in the Premier League match. So shout out to Craig Dawson for putting up that performance. Questions again for Haaland. So Mac, another game where he goes scoreless. But I guess one of the bright spots for Man City is Julian Alvarez, who scored a banger of a free kick. So his goal involvements so far this year, where Haaland is sort of slightly lagging, Julian Alvarez is popping up with good. So I guess we'll see what Man City do in their, of course, next, I guess, upcoming games, considering they do have a Champions League match against RB Leipzig, a team that just tied Bayern this weekend as well. So they look like they're going to be a team that, much like Wolves, once they do break, and with the likes of Pedro Neto and Juan Hee-chan, they look like a force to be reckoned with. So that's going to be interesting to watch as well. But Mac, is there another Premier League game that stood out to you that we can quickly discuss?
We focused a lot on the top of the table thus far in this podcast. I'm going to go down to the bottom, down to the doldrums of the table. And Luton Town winning 2-1 at Everton was mightily impressive. I think that this breeze, if Luton Town's, okay, I'll be honest up front. Luton Town's probably still going to go down. Let's just keep it. It is what it is. But if there was a defibrillator ready to go, it's what kept them kind of their lifeline going. You sense the pulse. They're still a little bit alive. Winning at Everton was absolutely key for them to be able to make sure that because that is a direct relegation contender in all likelihood. And I think that the way to be able to come away, pick up all 3 points, play well, I do, though, blame a lot of cases in this individual matchup on Everton, where if you look at both of the goals, they were clear and obvious errors made by several Evertonians. Where, again, if you just simply get the ball out, Ashley Young, you could feel him decaying on that touch on the post before he ended up clearing it and getting tackled by Lockyer. I think that's how you pronounce his name. And then even in terms of the free kick where they conceded the second goal in the 31st minute to Morris, where, again, there was 3 or 4 people, Luton Town players, on the far right-hand side of their pitch attacking that far side for that free kick, and no Evertonian was anywhere near them, where they got to get more players come over, match up to where Luton Town wanted to be able to put the ball in, and it was just a mistake. I guess the only positive, it is great to see Dominic Calvert-Lewin get on the score sheet. I know that he's been struggling with injuries. Him coming back to be able to get that was great, but in the second half, they didn't really have enough juice to be able to create opportunities. They had a couple of chances from Beto, from a header, a couple opportunities there, but overall, it's very disappointing from them. Great to see from Luton, where it does potentially put them in position. These 3 points for them, every point's vital. These 3 points away at Everton, absolutely important. It's much more important they win this game than a game against Man City, than a game against Manchester United. Maybe not fair on Manchester United. Maybe a game against Liverpool, where they want to beat their direct relegation rivals to avoid them getting points and then themselves picking up points. So I think it was a great game to watch. Full of mistakes, which in some ways is even more fun to watch than great performances. But great from Luton. They needed it, and again, it keeps their season, even though it's early days, a little bit alive.
Exactly. I love that you mentioned how big and important this is. Of course, their first Premier League win of the season, and all best of luck to them to try to stay in the Premier League and hopefully make their fans proud. But on the Everton side, they're definitely not making their home fans proud because they've lost every home game they played this season. The only wins have come away in the EFL Cups, both the second and third round, and as well against Everton against Brentford away, and even got a tie at Sheffield. So maybe is it something that with Everton that maybe their defenders are nervous playing at home, and that environment is not conducive to actually having great performances, and it leads to mistakes from their own players? It could be. I don't think these professional players should be that sort of affected by that environment, but for them and for Everton's sake, I do hope that they can fix that. And I think the only way for them to really have a shot to stay in the Premier League is to make their home, Goodison Park, a place where it's difficult for other teams to come and get points. Make it difficult, make it a fortress, and win as many games as possible at home, because realistically, playing away and winning away, mathematically, those are not going to be the games that you would win. So I'm interested to see what's going to happen for them. We just talked about them playing well, and now they've done this, so I'm not sure what's going to happen, Mac.
Just to quickly jump in there, I think the biggest differentiator is where the first couple of games, I really liked what Beto did coming into the team. He seemed like a physical presence, had a bit of pace, but it's all going to be about them taking their chances. They have an expected goals thus far this season in the Premier League of 12.3, have scored 6. So it's about them being clinical in the final third. They need to be able to make sure that they take those opportunities. If they're even marginally better, they pick up a couple more points. They're a mid-table team. I think that will be the difference. Sean Dyche gives the team a foundation, generally not in this game, a foundation of defensively we're going to be a certain level. It's about in that final third, are they going to create enough opportunities, and if they finish those opportunities they do create. So that's more so what they have to fix. They haven't been able to find the answer as of yet. That's why I think the DCL scoring, I think that's big for them. If he's able to someone that can kind of even that margin out even slightly, I think that will be huge for them. So I think that's their biggest separator. Be interesting to see. Not every week you can face Man United, so hopefully they'll get a chance to play them soon.
I love that. Of course, I love that. They of course should be looking to fix both parts, either their offense or their defense. I think the midfield is decent enough, but the quicker they can figure that out, the better their chances of survival will be. So we'll keep an eye out for that. But let's go straight into some Champions League matches to preview, Mac. The big one for me is going to be Newcastle hosting PSG. Of course, Newcastle back in the Champions League got that tie away at AC Milan 2 weeks ago. But this one against PSG, a new and sort of rejuvenated PSG, some might say, I think this might be a little bit more different. Watching sort of their game against Borussia Dortmund, they looked quite confident on the ball. Of course, they have willing runners and players that will cause problems to that back line for Newcastle. And now, of course, Newcastle, I'm sure their fans will be ready for that first game, first Champions League game back at home. But PSG is definitely going to be one of their tougher matches, if not the toughest match that they have had since sort of their start of the season. Not sure how you see how they're going to do, Mac, but of course, Newcastle coming off ever since the tie against AC Milan, 3 back-to-back wins where they actually haven't conceded at all. Sheffield 8-0, beating Man City in the EFL Cup, and then also Burnley this weekend. What are your expectations from this game, Mac?
I expect an Mbappe show. In all actuality, I would not be surprised. I think that, for one, I want to be able to kind of give the credits to Newcastle for making it this far in this way, and not to say that they come into this game without any shot, but for them to be in this competition to play against a player like that, I think that they just listening to other Newcastle fans, or even watching Match of the Day, listening to Alan Shearer talk about how excited he is for this matchup of, he's not working. That's where he's going to be able to watch this game. I think that's more so it shows what this club's going to be, as well as if there's a team theoretically in the world that can kind of use an abundance of money to be able to play a player if somebody's not going to go to Real Madrid, it's a team like Newcastle. And I think that the more and more they're in this conversation, playing these types of players are further going to kind of elevate and push further this club of where a lot of their fans want to be. Again, going in, I think PSG should win this. I would be surprised if they don't. I think offensively they have too many answers. Players like Mbappe, players like Dembele, to be able to go at, in my opinion, some of the weak links on this Newcastle team. If it be a Dan Burn, if it be a Trippier defensively, I think that might be a little bit too much to ask for, especially out wide. So I'm very excited for this game. I think it can be very interesting. Again, the interesting part for me is, I know that these last couple of games, things have gone very well for Newcastle, where defensively there is going to be similar to, it's a different levels. There's different levels to this, where defensively there is a kind of baseline of expectation of what Newcastle can give you, led by Pope, led by their central halves. This might be a little bit too much for them, but it's what the offensive's done. I know that it's kind of definitely accented by their 8-0 win against Sheffield United, but offensively they've played very well in the last couple of games. They've been able to create a lot more opportunities. Other players than just either Callum Wilson or Isak are scoring. Players like Almiron, who at the beginning of last season was a hot player everyone's picked up in fantasy leagues. So if players like that are getting back into form, or Anthony Gordon's getting on the score sheet, there is more of an attacking threat across the entire pitch. Then I think that games like this, they don't come in with just a defensive approach. They have other ways to be able to attack. So very excited for this matchup. But again, I'm expecting an Mbappe show.
Oh yeah, no, and as you said that, I'm like, hey, could that be his future team? Him sort of getting a taste against one of his future teams. But for me, I do agree. The offense, both of these teams offensively going at each other will be fascinating. But one thing that fascinates me even more might be the midfield battle, of which I expect Newcastle to try to impose themselves physically, for sure, at home against a midfield that PSG will probably play more sort of the figures that like to play with the ball and try to rotate the positions a lot. I am very confident of a Bruno Guimaraes, Sandro Tonali, and a Joe Linton midfield 3 that will try to set pace early and try to insert themselves physically, but also I want to see if they're able to get on the ball and play and try to create chances from midfield, because we know the likes of Guimaraes and Sandro Tonali have that interlocker. Can they do that? I think that's the next step. Can they do that in the Champions League against big teams, and can they replicate that moving into the season for the Premier League against other teams as well? So this might be a big matchup for them, and of course the only real player that has that Champions League sort of experience, Sandro Tonali, will be huge for them this game. So I'm interested to see how that will be. But is there another game that you're looking out for from this week's Champions League fixtures?
First of all, I want to start off by calling you a fraud of how you did not pick Napoli Real Madrid. I feel like that's, for me, clearly the most interesting matchup. Again, it's something that you should feel very personally attached to. So maybe, maybe you just want to save it to me. So thank you. But for me, I feel like this is the matchup of the Champions League thus far this year and this week. One I'm most excited about. You have so many different storylines. You're one going, and maybe we don't want to get into too much into it. What's going on with Victor Osimhen and Napoli in terms of his representatives threatening legal action? He's come out and now said that, of course, he loves the fans, he loves the team, he loves being there. Potentially playing against a team who is probably is in great form in Real Madrid, Jude Bellingham, star of the show, and potentially, if there is not an Mbappe solution, Osimhen may be their answer to what we're talking about for their strikers. So there are so many threads here of intersecting interest, or where if there's a player like Kvaratskhelia looking to be able to go to a different team for the amount of money that can potentially afford him. Again, Real Madrid are one of the few teams that can draw a player like that away from Napoli. They have, Napoli themselves haven't had the hottest start thus far in Serie A. Right now, they sit on the third in the table. But offensively, they scored 16 goals. They're still very much a goal threat. If they can solve some issues defensively, I think that, again, they can have a similar season to what they did last year and be a threat across all competitions. And again, Real Madrid, same thing. They are playing very, very well across all of their competitions. I think right now they sit first in La Liga. Again, but I think the biggest difference has been a Jude Fest, where he's kind of taken the team by charge, taking the reins over how the kind of the structure thing out. Way he's been able to kind of acclimate to his position, his new team, is anything short of amazing and better than anything anyone could have expected after that signing. So for me, there's so many, I guess, like I said, plot threads for this matchup. With on top of that, where if you probably, all things being equal, maybe Real Madrid probably have that little bit better of a team, but then Napoli are playing at home. So what do? How do you feel like this game could eventually go down? For me, again, I think that going into this, you may pick the midfield matchup again, and I think that's a fair matchup to look at. But for me, I'm looking at Napoli's offense. If Victor Osimhen and Kvaratskhelia can run rampant against, I would argue, Real Madrid's not greatest defensive line right now. I think that is probably their best advantage, is where if they can, in transition moments, even though they're playing at home, be able to isolate players one-on-one. I think that they have the tools and the tool belt to be able to take apart any defense across the world of football. So I think that that's where they need to go. I think that's where they'll get their joy. If they can play sound enough defensively, hit them on transition, I think they could be a threat. But overall, I think this is going to be an exciting game. So I can't wait to watch it.
I'm very, very excited as well. I think two players that I'll be watching out for to see how they fare in this game will be Kvaratskhelia for Napoli and, of course, Jude Bellingham for Real Madrid. It's a game where I think, like you said, both teams have started the season quite well in relative terms for the respective competitions, La Liga and Serie A, but I feel like both teams need a big Champions League win to sort of announce themselves that they're here both in the Champions League and in the respective leagues, and I think this is the game to do it. If Napoli can do that, if Kvaratskhelia can get involved with goals, he so far for Napoli in the Serie A only has 1 goal and 3 assists. This will be the game that kickstarts it, I think, and so this would be his opportunity, with all eyes on this game, to show what he's worth, and of course make a case for himself to either get that money, get that bag, or hey, if there's teams that are out there looking for a player of his profile, look no further. He can do it in Serie A, winning the league last year. He can do it in the Champions League against, of course, Real Madrid. So that's going to be big for them. But of course, Jude Bellingham for Real Madrid. Mac, you already mentioned how big he's been. Can we just appreciate, I'm not sure if you saw his assist for the goal that Real Madrid had this weekend. Outside foot, Trivela pass, pinpoint accuracy. So I'm looking for him, actually, because the midfield of Lobotka, Zielinski, and Anguissa, who are likely to start for Napoli last year, great for them all season. But can Bellingham be sort of that player that disrupts that, is able to cause problems for them defensively? They are going to try to get on the ball, those three, and create, but will they have sort of a threat in the back of their heads of Bellingham sort of roaming around and picking up spots where he's going to be comfortable getting into? And also, will he be getting into the box at the end of the crosses, those late runs where he's gotten a couple of goals so far this season, and, continue his great start to the season? So those are, of course, two big players that I'll be watching for this game, and I definitely can't wait to watch that game myself. But I guess this is all the time we have for now, Max. So we'll conclude here for today. If you like what you heard, if you like what you heard, guys, please like and subscribe to us on our social medias. That's at @house_of_footy. If you have any comments, suggestions, or general banter, get in touch with us via email as well, houseoffooty@hotmail.com. The next time you hear from us will be later this week when we review the action from match week 2 of the Champions League, and we'll also preview this weekend's Premier League action. But thank you, Mac, for joining us.
Zaha's coming from Man United's head this weekend, boys. Don't worry.
And of course, the league is out to get Liverpool, boys. So see you guys soon.